of Sumerian writing. The 5,000 seals Bogdanos's report had isolated were, in Salah's hypothesis, the documentation set. The invasion, the museum looting, the closure of the ziggurat, the camp on top of Babylon, these were not separate. They were one operation, and this operation was preemptive. The United States had moved before Saddam could finish what he was doing. Now, of course, Salah had no inside source for any of this. He didn't claim to, because he was doing what a lot of you and I do. We're just pattern matching. He was looking at what was available on public record and just proposing his interpretation of it. The Anunnaki framing, the ancient Sumerian deity class who, in some interpretive traditions, were associated with celestial origin. And he sort of folded in as the underlying mythological frame, but he was very careful in the paper about distinguishing what was documented from what was his hypothesis. Eventually, he did finish the paper, and he uploaded it to a website called Bibliotheca Pleiades, which was one of the main early exopolitics archives on the internet. And he sent it out across his subscriber list, and the paper entered circulation late 2003-ish. Now, due to the claims of this, the Pentagon did not respond, the State Department didn't respond, Task Force 20, of course, didn't respond. I mean, no major press outlet picked the paper up or even picked it up in order to debunk it. There was really no skeptical takedown in the Washington Post, and it had kind of just been forgotten about. Until, in June of 2007, in a hotel room in Las Vegas, Nevada, a man named Dan Burish sat down across from two researchers who ran a website called Project Camelot. Now, this was and still is a website run by Carrie Lynn Cassidy and Bill Ryan, who are two researchers specializing in long-form interviews with self-described whistleblowers. And their format was relatively simple. Cassidy and Ryan would set up a camera in a hotel room, they'd sit a person down across from them, and they let that person talk for as long as they want to with no editing. They don't challenge them, they don't try and fact check them. They would just let the interview run for several hours at a time. And when they were finished, they would upload it to projectcamelot.org. And it would just sit there on public record, available for anybody to watch. So Burish, he sat down, he turned on his microphone, and he began to talk. Now, who Burish was, that was sort of the first contested question of the entire interview. Because according to Burish, he was a former Area 51 microbiologist. He had worked on something called Project Lotus and something called Project Aquarius. He had been briefed, he said, by the innermost circle of what was sometimes referred to as Majestic 12, which is the alleged committee that, according to a small but persistent body of conspiracy literature, had been overseeing the United States government's classified relationship with extraterrestrial phenomena since, like the late 1940s? The Majestic 12 briefings he described are all unverifiable by definition as well. So when Burish sat down in that hotel room in June of 2007 and began talking, he was not talking from a position of confirmed institutional credibility. He was talking from a position of contested institutional credibility. And what Burish said next was basically a story. He told Cassidy and Ryan that an international coalition, and he was very specific, he named the United Nations, the European Union, and NATO, had over the previous years decommissioned at least 50 man-made devices around the world. These devices, he explained, were capable of accessing what he called natural Einstein-Rosen bridges. Now, in physics, an Einstein-Rosen bridge is the technical term for a wormhole, a hypothetical shortcut through space-time predicted by general relativity. Never observed, but mathematically consistent with the equations. Now, what Burish was claiming is that these were not theoretical objects. They were actual operational locations. There were natural ones in very specific places on the Earth. And human beings had, at least according to him, built devices that could access them. And surprise, the government knows about them. And then Cassidy asked the question, was Iraq one of those locations? And Burish's answer, on camera, on record, was, oh, absolutely. Now, he was very specific about the technology. The decommissioned Stargate, as Burish described it, broke down into three components. You see, there was a projection component, there was a ring component, and there was a barrel component. And he said the looking glass technology, which is its own deep rabbit hole in the literature, had been back engineered from the Stargate technology using data extracted from a specific kind of source material. And that source material, in Burrish's account, was Sumerian cylinder seals. Just like I said before, they were not decorative artifacts, they were reverse engineered schematics. Technical documentation pressed into clay many, many, many years ago, encoded in the iconography of the earliest written language on Earth. And it just so happens that the 5,000 seals from the museum in the Burrish's account were the documentation set. And he said that there is no doubt whatsoever when it comes to the looking glasses and when it comes to the Stargate technology that it has been decommissioned. Well, the footage has been uploaded to projectcamelot.org and the transcript followed, and it stayed there. Now, Burrish also had a lot of things on his side because he had specific technical details, the broader institutional shape that Sallah had hypothesized about 4 years earlier. He just kind of got a lot of things right. I mean, Sallah had even said that these cylinder seals were the target. Burrish said they were the schematics. Sallah had said that the operation was preemptive. Burrish said the decommissioning was global. So if this was really nothing more than two unconnected accounts, a researcher and an alleged whistleblower, 4 years apart, neither with any institutional acknowledgement behind them, you could, technically close this and walk away, because the exopolitics forums have thousands of stories like it. Pattern matchers and self-proclaimed insiders, both unverifiable. Except that the institutional shape Sallah had hypothesized about in 2003 was 14 years later, get this, confirmed by the United States Pentagon. It just so happens that in December of 2017, the New York Times broke a story, which was that the Pentagon had been running for over a decade a classified program called ATIP, otherwise known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Now, the budget was around $22 million, and the senator who had pushed for this program and protected it from being defunded was Senator Harry Reid, the Democrat from Nevada. The director of the program had been a Pentagon counterintelligence official named Luis Elizondo. And that man, Elizondo, only 2 months prior, in October of 2017, actually resigned from the Department of Defense. And he resigned by his own public statement in protest of how the Pentagon was treating what ATIP had been studying. At the time, people sort of assumed that those first few weeks after the New York Times article ran, that ATIP had been studying UFOs or lights in the sky. It's the kind of thing that you would expect a classified Pentagon program with that name to be studying. But the more the disclosure unfolded over the following months, the clearer it became that ATIP had not just been studying lights in the sky. Because the ATIP funding chain, when it was eventually traced, ran through a Defense Intelligence Agency contract called AWASP. Well, not really, but it's short for the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. The DIA had awarded AWASP to a private aerospace company called Bigelow Aerospace. And we all know that to be owned by a man named Robert Bigelow, who is none other than a real estate billionaire. And guess what else he does? Not only does he own an aerospace company, but he also owns Skinwalker Ranch. And in fact, he didn't just buy Skinwalker Ranch, he turned it into his own private research site. From 2008 to 2010, under that same contract by AWASP, the United States government, through Bigelow's company, was paying scientists and former military contractors to live and document what was happening there. And what they documented was the entire spectrum of what the majority, the general public, refer to as paranormal phenomena. We're talking shadow creatures, werewolves, Bigfoot, all sorts of sci-fi interdimensional stuff going on, poltergeist activity, objects moving on their own, light anomalies, things that defy our realm of physics. So we know that there was definitely something going on there, and it was being heavily documented. So, look, we can really look at this in two ways. Sallah in 2003 pattern matched on public reporting and got lucky on the broader shape, right? He guessed and the shape turned out to be there. As for Iraq specifically, The cylinder seals, the basement level breach, the tanks that didn't intervene, none of that is in any of the disclosed ATIP files. None of it has really been independently confirmed by any institutional source. Burrish's 2007 interview was, I guess in this reading, a fabrication that just happened to align with Salah's hypothesis because Burrish had happened to read that hypothesis. So really it's coincidence plus the human tendency to find patterns in the noise. Now, the other one is that there's actually truth in this. Salah in 2003 was reading a real institutional pattern, the same one that 14 years later, the Pentagon would be forced to disclose. Burrish in 2007 was a real corroborator with real internal knowledge, which is why his 3-component breakdown of the technology was as specific as it was. The Iraq case is real. The 5,000 SEALs were extracted because they were what the operation was after. And the reason the ATIP files do not mention Iraq is that the Iraq operation was held back from disclosure. It was simply compartmentalized at a higher classification. So, folks, what do you guys think? I'd love to know your thoughts. And because you guys made it this far, I want you to all comment down below Stargate, so that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy storytelling like this, where we deep dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. And as always, never forget, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.
Alchemy is balance. Too much light blindeth as surely as darkness. Alchemy is balance. Too much light blindeth as surely as darkness.
When I went to work, I had my gun in the back of my pants. I get to work. My boss is like, "So how was your date?" Said it didn't happen. She was like, "What?" Didn't happen. I went on to work. I started doing stuff, just doing little stuff to stay busy. But every little noise I heard, I was jumping. I'd look at the door, or if a shadow went by, somebody walking down the street, I'm looking, jerk my head and look at my boss. Must have been watching me because she's like, "Rory, you okay?" "No, I'm not." She's like, "What's the matter?" "I don't want to talk about it." "What?" "I don't want to talk about it." So she, the whole day she stayed at me. "Sure, you can talk to me, Rory. I know you ain't got a lot of family here. You want to talk to me about it? Tell me what." "No, I don't." Finally, I got kind of sick of it. She was like, well, why you don't want to talk to me about it?" I said, "Because the person that left out of here Friday is not the person that came back Tuesday. And if I tell you what happened to me, it's gonna cost me my job." She's like, what? I'm like, yeah. So I don't want to talk about it. But she could see that it was really bothering me. Finally, I guess it was a little bit before 3 o'clock. She's like, she pulled me to the side. She's like, Roy, just tell me what happened. She said, well, can I ask you some questions about the date? I'm like, what? No date. She was like, what? I'm like, she didn't show up. And she's like, wait a minute. She's like, so you didn't kill that girl. You didn't rape her or nothing like that. And I'm like, how can I kill or rape somebody that never showed up? She's like, just tell me what happened. I said, I'll tell you what happened to me on one condition. She said, what's that? I said, go back in the office and print out my final check. Because when I get done talking, I know I'm going to have a job, but I want to at least leave out of here with my final paycheck. She's like, I'm not going to fire you. You said you didn't commit a crime or nothing. I'm not going to fire you. And I stood there and I looked at her for probably a good solid minute. And I was like, okay, you want to know what happened? And I told her. She didn't interrupt me. She just stood at the end of the counter and she kind of was like this, looking at me. And when I got done talking, she said, kind of matter of factly,
Alchemy is balance. Too much light blindeth as surely as darkness.
Glyphotic cultists hide among common folk now. Trust no one.